Hey guys, it's Paradise, and I'm joined with 26 because today we're going to go over our review and impressions after getting several hours of hands-on time with Monster Hunter Wilds. 26, there's a lot of things to go through here because we weren't expecting everything from what we got to play, and we wanted to play more, right?
Yeah, just to set expectations. So, by the way, guys, this isn't new impressions. We never got to do our impressions at all from Gamescom because we've been putting out like impressions on the different weapons. We've just been talking about like information and all of that stuff. So now we finally get to sit down and yap about what we actually got to play at the actual session. So I'm actually excited for this one.
Yeah, that's just it. It's different to like break down the weapons and then just go over how it like felt to play and what we actually got to play. So hopefully this gives you guys like an insight into what was actually playable and how it felt as like a Monster Hunter player that's played, you know, a variety of different Monster Hunter games. So for me, going back to like Gen. So I'll start off by saying, again, we didn't get to play as much as we wanted. It was about 4 hours in total, but that was broken up throughout several days across different times we got to play different versions of the demo because there was 2 versions that were available. One was definitely better than the other, and we'll get into that very, very soon. But essentially, the queues were massive, as you guys know. We ended up queuing multiple times to try and get to actually play it. There was a few times where we had to drop out of the queue as well because we just weren't going to make it in time. So we really tried to play as much as possible so that we could talk about as many weapons as, you know, as we can to bring that to you guys, as well as other information of things that are just in the demo, which a lot of you guys also got to see in the stream that we did, because I feel like that stream went quite well because we had a couple runs on the demo beforehand, so we knew like the decimal damage setting that we showed you guys and a few other tidbits throughout. But to recap, 26, tell us about the first mission, which is the first demo that we got to play, which is the more shorter one.
Yeah, so essentially there were 2 demos at Gamescom that players could play. There was the kind of single player onboarding process, like the first early hours, the golden hour of like when a game's trying to get you up to speed, and this was more of a story focused demo. If you queue for this line, you're basically getting scammed because the other demo was actually sick. It was more open-ended, it had multiple monsters that you could hunt. It was actually half an hour, so it wasn't dependent on how quickly you completed a demo. But that had like Ray Dow in it. It had Doshaguma. Doshaguma. It had Chasacabra and even Balahara in there for you to hunt. So you had a plethora of monsters to hunt in the other demo. But the actual story demo, as I would like to call it, was basically your introduction to the campaign. You had Alma there. You had a bunch of like set pieces that really show off what they're going for in this game, which is essentially they're just trying to make it a proper story-focused campaign. The story in Monster Hunter it's been there, but it's never been like a focus, and they're trying to go against these like bigger games in terms of like their story scope, in terms of like God of War, when they got that stuff going on. They've got like Uncharted, those Sony games. When you think of like single player focused games and with their epic story, I think they're trying to incorporate that into the Monster Hunter kind of franchise in a way to give those players that want that story feeling something to kind of really sink their teeth into. And I'm always about those story games. I love myself some Final Fantasy, I love myself some God of War, I love Metal Gear. Bring back Metal Gear. But yeah, all of that stuff is definitely super exciting to see them really delve into that story stuff. So yeah, what did you think of the demo?
Yeah, so that first story mission, it was basically like 26. We were very familiar with the trailers. It was that trailer where all of the Balahara like dive in and chasing you down, and I feel like this was a super early, maybe even one of the, if not the first missions in the game. It's quite hard to tell, but it was a very linear story mission, so you did have some freedom, especially when you were in the sand and they were all like diving around you and you're running away from them. But you were also kind of like very steered towards that sort of pathway that they go in the trailer. And you know, you're shooting like your slinger hook and you're grabbing ammo as you go, and you're doing like screamer pods to knock them out of the sand. So that was all really cool stuff. And what I will say is, I think if they can pull off the story like being actually interesting, this could be like a massive Monster Hunter game for people. Because let's be real, the story, like you say, has always been like sort of trickle fed and not fully dived into. And there's a lot of lore in Monster Hunter, but a lot of it is not fully explained. And like you can see different, like, I don't know if it's like creators or like Twitter pages that are out there that like really try and dive into stuff, but a lot of it isn't actually like proper confirmed official stuff. It's sort of like fan theories or piecing together different things across different games. So hopefully it will give us those answers like to different monsters and different things in the world of like Monster Hunter. But yeah, it was that very linear story. What I will say though is just before you went out to hunt the Chatacabra, which was the only thing you could do in that story mission, you did have like the barrel, which was like a trading dummy. So you could like test a couple things out. But again, remember, a lot of the new features that were added in were like the focus strikes and stuff like that. So even though we got to play this mission a few times, you couldn't properly test weapons because unless you were fighting the Chatacabra, which would end the demo as soon as you're done, and it dies very quickly, it's not a hard fight, you couldn't test focus strikes and all of the proper stuff on the target dummy. And that's where the second demo that was at Gamescom comes in, which was the far better one, like we said, which was a proper alpha Doshaguma hunt. And it had Chatacabra, it had Raidao, it had Balahara out in the map. You guys would have seen different gameplay that we've put out, like the Balahara doing the quicksand trap, or just Raidao in general being just an awesome monster, which actually every time we played it, we never actually got him to spawn for us apart from the stream, but we were trying to showcase the weapons, so we didn't properly hunt him in the stream. Different people have given us different answers that Raidao will always show up or shows up at different times in the demo. I'm telling you guys, we had a recording session, we played that hunt, we literally our goal was like, let's get some Raidao, and he didn't show up. So I'm not too sure about it. He
definitely didn't show up in our session because you can see the icon on the map. It's like a mystery monster like appears, you can see it. So we definitely didn't get it to spawn in actually our session as well. But like, it's interesting to see that a lot of people did, and then did try to like fight him, and then he did get clapped like as well. or a lot of people just their footage just corrupted as well. If they recorded Raidao, they just didn't like actually get any footage of it because it corrupted for some reason, which is crazy.
Too powerful of a monster. It's the electricity. But yeah, that second demo was the one because it was more open world. You could actually go and explore. You could actually like test things out properly. But once people, like after the first day, I feel like people knew that was the good demo because it was split into two sides on the booth. Do you remember? So the right side was the Chatacabra story mission, very short. Like if you know how to hunt, I would probably say you could do it in like 5-6 minutes. Like including the story intro bit, and then the other one was the full half-an-hour run. And as soon as people cottoned on that was the better one to play, the queue was like you couldn't play it, you were done. It was literally 10-hour queue. So but it was also multiplayer outside of the technical difficulty days. So you could actually see people hunting in multiplayer, and there was all kinds of interesting stuff that goes with that because then you could see like how the wounds interact with multiple players. You could see like your buddy standing on top of the monster after it's been defeated because you can like stand on them now, as well as a few other things like when they're riding their secrets around and just all kinds of cool stuff. But let's touch on the actual gameplay specifically because a lot of people have like a preference, right? Some people much prefer the world playstyle, which was very grounded and gritty and almost a bit slower, and some people now prefer the Rise playstyle, which was like, I'd just say with more anime, like wirebug dashing around, zoom in and doing crazy moves. And that's two very different play styles. They're both Rise and World play very different. And 26, I'll let you kick it off. How did you feel about the game in terms of comparing it to Rise and World?
So I'm trying to give people context that haven't necessarily like played it before. So it doesn't feel like Rise and World combined. It feels like World with Rise stuff, if you get what I'm saying. So it has like the world as the base, but then you have like a bunch of options in combat that are definitely more Rise inspired per se, and it definitely doesn't feel like Rise where you're like wire bugging everywhere, running off walls and going crazy. It definitely feels like that Monster Hunter World vibe where it's a bit more slow and purposeful, at least in this demo. Obviously we've got some crazy moves. We've got like the long swords like Spirit Release Slash, we've got tracer arrows, we've got some crazy stuff that you would have seen in Rise, but the whole combat feels a little bit slower paced than in Rise per se, and it definitely feels a bit smoother than World. After having recently played it on the base PS4 version, it felt a bit sluggish on the base PS4 version, but PC it felt smooth. It kind of felt smooth in that way. We'll talk about performance in a second, but in general, World with a little bit of Rise spice on top, you know, it's like all the good stuff that we like from Rise in there.
Yeah, when we will talk about performance, because there is some stuff to go over there, and it definitely was iffy in places, and we'll dive into that. You've pretty much answered for me. I was like a great explanation, 26. We haven't even fully talked about that, but yeah, it's literally like if you had Monster Hunter World, if you gave them the Palamutes, which is your Sacrets now, that's the biggest difference, I feel like, because in World, if you remember, it was like you fight the monster, you need to potion or sharpen. You have to do that more old school Monster Hunter thing of find the right timing, disengage, chug your potion or sharpen. And I will also say, remember when people complained that you could like move and do your potions and stuff like that from the old iteration? But if you go back to those old games, you could just move to the next map, chug a potion, sharpen, and go back in. Because it was all instant. So you could cheese it in old games. I like the way it works now, where the monster will chase you down. So you have to time it a bit more skillfully. And the Palamutes kind of alleviated that in Rise, because you could hop on the back of a Palamute, chug a potion, sharpen, and while you're riding around and avoid the monster. And you can still do that now on the Sacred, because that was something I tested, and you can still do that. To be honest, it's like a quality of life thing. It makes it a bit easier to manage your sharpness meter and your health in the fight. Making things a bit easier also is a double-edged sword, because you don't want the game to be too easy, because that difficulty of World and that grounded feeling was something that people really, really like. But yeah, it's basically a World base if you add the Palamute, which is the Sacred, and then, just like you said, sprinkle in some Rise goodness, like a lot of the switch skills have been incorporated into the weapon moveset, and that's where that Rise flourish comes in. So it's not like super anime pop a wire bug, it's now just a move that you do at the end of a combo or something like that. And I think they hit a good balance, and it felt good there. But let's talk about, speaking of Monster Hunter World, let's talk about the world in Monster Hunter Rise, because that's something that is vastly different, and they're going in a completely different way with Wilds, with the actual world. So it's the seamless world now, which, they're open world, seamless. What's the exact difference? My understanding, 26, correct me if I'm wrong, is that not everywhere is accessible at the beginning. Like, almost areas might be HR locked. So that's why it's not open world, because everything's not open. So it's seamless in that there's no load screens unless you actually like fast travel across the world. But I think that's the main difference there. And then the world has a bigger focus on ecology. And 26, you love the ecology, so at least the way they're doing it in Wild. I love the capturing ecology, but you love the way that they're incorporating it into Wild. So tell us about that.
No, definitely. I think people are still misunderstanding that this game, all the locales will be sewn together into one big, like, seamless open world, to save a better word or whatever, because what they've actually said is the Windward's Plain, which is the desert area that we've seen, is actually connected to the Scarlet Forest through the river. So we know we're going to be able to ride our little Sacrets through to the river on that. And just when it comes to ecology, they've spoken about it in interviews. I don't know how much they were hyping it up, because I didn't see how impactful it was actually when I was playing. So sometimes developers are like, oh, we've made these massive sweeping changes and stuff. Now the flowers grow, and you just never actually pay attention to them in gameplay. So I didn't actually see this in the demo, but they're saying the ecology and the ecosystem this time is going to be way more in depth in terms of if you're hunting things into non-existence. Like, you hunt too many things, you're going to hunt them into non-existence essentially. So that's going to have an impact on when you go out to go find things. If you're trying to like hunt alphas or whatever, you have to separate them from the pack. We did actually see that play out, because we had to throw the doo-doo pod on them, the dung pod.
The new
and then
large dung.
the new longest dung pod. The poop nuke on them. But when it comes down to things like monsters being in different locations, they've said that that's going to play in a part into it. If you like killed a monster or taken down or hunted a monster in a particular location, they might go to another area looking for food, and that might have a cascading effect that has a broader thing on the whole world, where all the monsters are in different places, different things are happening. There's different turf wars, like you're expecting a Balahara to be here, but he's actually over here with a Rathalos eating the Rathalos because you hunted a Chatacabra in another area and the Chatacabra is its food or something like that. So that is super interesting, especially if it has a massive impact in the end game. I want to see roaming packs of Nergigantes. I've said this and I've joked about this in every video that we've made. I just want to see an alpha Nergigante and all of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think there was a small glimpse into some of that stuff with like the small monsters having like their own little habitat and attacking the big monster if it came near it, or like the pack, the little pack of like monsters attacking a Doshaguma and that kind of stuff. So there's this bigger focus, but again, with a curated demo like there was at Gamescom, you can't really know because it's not the final game, and also we just didn't get to play enough to like sit there and watch a flower grow. You're too busy trying out the weapons and that kind of stuff. But also the world map, or just the map itself, looked really cool with its like 3D effect now, and you could properly spin and zoom into it, and it was also like, what do you call it, like an overlay. Like it wasn't a separate screen that you were pulled out into, so you could pin an objective, ride to it, pull up your map. You could still see like what's around you as you were riding, and actually look on the map and see what monsters there are. And it gave information on like the current season and when that's going to shift. I think it may have even told you like if like when the sand tide was coming, the weather effect.
Did. Yeah.
It even had like timers for when monsters are like going to come and go, and all that kind of stuff. So there was a lot more on the map that was actually like helpful to gameplay, which I really, really like.
And with that sick thing about that is, though, they actually have like a list of all the monsters that are in the area and the rewards and drops, so it definitely looks like more like investigations than anything else. And that's like, if you played a lot of World and you were like gone past the hours that you should have realistically been playing it because you're just hunting the same things over for some decorations, then you know that investigation loop and trying to grind out for them stuff. And that I always enjoyed. I know a load of people didn't enjoy, but I really enjoyed that. So seeing that incorporated into the kind of like just a core game from start to finish is kind of cool.
Yeah, and it's just a better way to like start hunts, especially in like multiplayer. You don't have to like line it up with the quest board, get everyone to do it. It's just like open the map, there's the monster, here's the list of monsters, start the quest, everyone runs over, and it was super easy to get going. And that's just gonna, like, think about the downtime in Monster Hunter World, even Rise between hunts. Like, you can't just back to back to back without a load of menu screens, eating your food, posting the quest, changing your armor set, and all that kind of stuff. And although some of that stuff you're still going to want to do, it's just so much easier because it's seamless. So that's a big thing. And I think that's where a lot of quality of life additions have been added in. So not just in the map, but in like gathering things, which you can do from a range and from a range while mounted. 2.6, I love my gathering sets. It's gonna be a breeze in Wilds, guys. You just ride your sacred, you just yoink everything. It has a good reach. It was like about 10-20 feet, I feel like, that you could actually pick something up from a distance. So I think of those gathering runs, especially in like Monster Hunter World, which they were long. Like if you actually made an effort to farm stuff, it's all part of the fun. But being able to streamline it is going to be just a massive change for me. Obviously, the Sacred itself, kind of in the vein of the Palamute, is a big quality of life improvement for traversal because the world is a lot bigger now. I think each area is substantially bigger than its equivalent in both like Rise in World, and I would even say from Generations as well. Like, it's just every individual zone is a lot bigger, so there's a lot more land to travel. So you kind of want that Sacred. And then there's like portable cooking and the tents, which are also fast travel points. Was there any other like quality of life stuff that you really liked?
No, but like in terms of just how wacky they can go with the gameplay, I always like the alphas in the Pokemon game. What was it called? Legends Arceus.
Yeah.
And those were kind of basically rare spawns. Imagine if I know some people probably dislike this because of the way that Monster Hunter essentially works in terms of if you're going on a hunt, you can hunt something, right? But imagine if, this is a harebrained idea, right? Imagine if they had the ability in-game where they added in a rare subspecies that only spawns in particular conditions. They've already said that Raidal does this, but even rarer than that, but it's a vicious monster and it's super hard to take down. So it would be a special experience if you encountered that. Say if it was like a alpha Kolv Taroth that was like silver or platinum, and it was super hard to take down, and everyone's I was one of the few people to take down that alpha Kolv Taroth. I would be excited to see that. So the system's layered on in terms of ecology. I'm excited to see where the developers go and how deep they go to and take it. Obviously that's my dumb idea. I don't expect them to necessarily introduce that into the game is just something that I personally would be excited about. I know a lot of other people wouldn't be excited about that because they're just like, it wastes my time. I just want to hunt my monsters. But yeah, something like
No,
that, just to bring that
idea.
uniqueness to the actual game.
No, I like the idea, and I think there's actually like existing mechanics in past games that would enable that and almost give like credibility to it. If you look at I can't remember what it was called in Rise. You know, the virus, the blood virus with the curios, like it enrages the monster, right? So if there's a chance for a monster to like be encountered and it's like an alpha and it's enraged and it's like you say, like a colored variant, a subspecies, that's like a super rare mixture of like mechanics and different things, and it could behave differently. It could have like a special decoration or talisman that it drops, and that gives you something to try and farm and chase. So stuff like that would be really cool. They've got to have something interesting. Like it's more open, it's more seamless open world now. So they've got to have some surprises to bump into. Like
and that would make you feel like you're actually hunting a monster because you're going out actively looking for it. I think that's one part that's been lost in Monster Hunter like over the years. Is like, we've got way more action, but not enough hunting because you're just like, before it felt like you were hunting, you purposely prepared for that monster and stuff like that. Now everything's a bit more convenient. Maybe this will bring that back in a different way where you still have that convenience, but you actually are actively hunting for that kind of elusive monster or that harder monster or whatever.
Maybe you find like the scoutfly tracks, you know, and you're chasing it.
Yeah,
down.
exactly.
But let's touch on weapons, and we won't go too detailed here because we have breakdowns on the weapons on the channel already. So if you want very specific things on like the charge blade, the longsword, the switch axe, the insect glaive, all that stuff, we have that on the channel. Again, we played as much as we physically could, and like, it still wasn't enough. So we've tried as many weapons as we can. It wasn't all of them. Some of them, you know, you're like, oh, I'll play that one tomorrow, and then you get there tomorrow and the queue's just too big and you have to just walk away, and it's a sad day. But from the weapons we did try, I'll just quickly point out, I think that, like, for me, the highlight was the switch axe. The switch axe was feeling so good. Like, they gave it everything I felt like it needed, which is a way to respond to the monster in either mode, both axe and sword mode. So you've got the offset, you've got the counter, you've got the full release after doing an element discharge, which is like sort of like a rise switch skill that has been incorporated into the moveset, and it's really satisfying to pull off. Zero Sum is still in the game, all of this stuff. So I just, yeah, my highlight was switch axe because I feel like they gave it everything I wanted them to give it. Which, like we've said before, has that sprinkling of rise in it, but that base feeling of what the weapon actually felt like in like Monster Hunter World. And outside of that, you know, I did play a bunch of them. But 2-6, what was your weapon highlight?
It's gonna have to be the longsword, because as much as people are like, oh yeah, it looks busted in a way, it actually just feels like a completely different weapon to play with familiar moves, because essentially they've added so much to that weapon in terms of like mobility and your loops that I'm having so much fun with it. And I think if you're a longsword main and you played that in World or Rise, you're going to have like so much more fun, because this one feels like a layer of fun on top of that. It's like they just went ham with it as well. Even down to the bow, though. The bow was super exciting to play. Most of the weapons that we played, because it's a combination of World and Rise, it just felt fun across the board. And I think the combat system as a whole is like indicative of that. Obviously people are a little bit antsy about the IG, but we haven't played the full extent of that weapon to know what is the broad spectrum of like what it has to offer is. But even hitting stuff with the IG was fun, and doing like the big spiral like slash thing was like, yeah, it was so satisfying. So it wasn't like any of the weapons were boring or they felt bad to play. They all felt sick to play and super exciting to play with. And people are a bit worried about damage on certain weapons now, but we don't have like any data on that to know exactly how it's going to actually pan out in the long run. But like charge blade was sick, bow was sick, light bowgun was sick, heavy bowgun I didn't get that much chance to play with it, but it was pretty cool. Dual blades I think you played a little bit with, was pretty cool. Hunting horn was like cool. All the weapons
hunting
were
horn
like
was very
fun.
Cool. I think I'm not a hunting horn main, but you know, we dabble with it, and it felt really good. And I think with those specific things on the weapons that we didn't get enough time on hands-on to like really master, is where people will find the most enjoyment from. Like, for example, the hunting horn having the echo bubble as well as the focus strike, and you can use them to quick play notes, which is something I didn't really get to like properly try out in our, like, for example, in our stream when we did it. But imagine you're doing a focus strike, you can input, I think, 3 or 4 notes during the animation that will cue the song. So the focus strike isn't just a way to pop a wound, it's a way to bank a song without having to go through the actual combo loop of doing it. So there's like really cool things like that they've added in or sprinkled on top of weapons. And I think sort of closing thoughts on the weapons is, we've played Rise, Sunbreak, World, Gen 2.6, you've even played ones before that. You want a weapon to feel like familiar, like, oh, it's my home, but you also want something to like learn and master and have a little flair and a little new stuff, so it doesn't just feel like boring. And I feel like they've really achieved that here because of the iterations to the core moveset. Your combos are almost either different now or extended, and that is something really cool because it's actually something new to learn and master. So like the switch axe having like full release at the end of its element discharge, the great sword having new ways to like shortcut into true charge slash, as well as all the other additions like with the offset attacks and stuff like that. It doesn't just feel like, oh, I'm just playing World but with a new skin and monsters, or oh, I'm just playing Rise with a new skin and new monsters. It feels like something new and exciting to learn. So I really like that about it. But let's talk about the sort of graphics and performance, as this has been a point of contention for some people online. And we can give a little bit of insight into it, having actually played it, especially having played it now across different machines, because every time you get on the demo, you're in a different, a different little spot on the show floor. And like our recording session was a different spot. So 2.6, do you have any thoughts about, like, do you want to start with the graphics or the performance?
Yeah, well, for me personally, like, I know when Rise was coming out, we said a bit about like the graphics in this, but I think this game in general looks pretty good. I know some people are not sold on it. My girlfriend, every time she looks at it, is like, the graphics don't look like that great. But if you actually see it, like when you're actually playing it, it looks sick. Like, it looks cool. I think it's like pretty smooth. Maybe it doesn't look as good as some of the other RE engine games out there. Like if you compare it to like DMC or not Metal Gear or Resident Evil, then you'll see like those games are like pushing the boundaries of like next gen in terms of like the graphical fidelity. But this is an open world game, so there's always going to be that compromise in terms of when you go seamless. Bigger. It's a seamless game, so there's always going to be that compromise on like textures and stuff like that. And we haven't necessarily seen it running with the release version to know exactly what it's going to look like and what it's finalized to actually look like. But in terms of like the graphics, I was pretty happy and okay with it. I know some people were not like super blown away with it. It will be interesting to get you guys' opinion on that. Be nice in the comments, guys. Don't roast each other about the graphics, because it's just a matter of opinions. People get so upset when talking about graphics. They're just like, who cares about the graphics? It's a Monster Hunter game. It's all about the gameplay. Look, for me personally, when I'm playing a game, it needs to have good graphics, a decent story, so it feels like memorable in some type of way for me, because I am a story guy, so I lean in towards that stuff, and good music just being, and audio in general, because like one of my favorite moments from World is that Safi Jiva bit where he drops like the Sapphire Star, and it's like the audio drops out, and that was like a combination of all three. You won't get those moments if the graphics are not like that. We are missing those moments from Rise for me personally, because they had a few of them, but World took it to that level where you just saw some insane stuff. You saw Fatalis like burning down a gate and stuff like that, and the first time you see that, you're like, I'm blown. I want to get back to that, and I definitely think that this Wilds is definitely capable of that, and I can't wait to see like what monsters they introduce. If this whole like Sandfield's like blowing up, big monsters that we're like riding on sacreds, like chopping down stuff, it's going to be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it should already be out there and known that we kind of have the same opinion when it comes to like that kind of stuff. Obviously, gameplay is a super impactful thing and is what keeps you coming back. But in terms of getting new people into a game, in terms of like upping your immersion level so you really feel like you're in the world, the graphics, the music, and the atmosphere is always going to be important. And like that's not like if I load up an old Game Boy game or a SNES game, it's fine. I know what I'm going in for. But if I'm loading up a brand new next gen PlayStation 5 or PC game that's coming out in 2020, 2025 in this case, there's an expectation that's there that it's going to look, you know, like a new game that comes out in that year. So, yeah, when you look, here's the thing though, it's a desert area, and there's only so much that can be done to make a desert area look good, because it's all going to be sand, maybe the occasional rock.
Yeah, true.
So, like, this is my biggest like thing when it comes to like the visuals. Is, do you remember the World trailer? It was in the ancient forest, and the Anjanath bursts out, and the Rathalos attacks. The hunter pops the flare, and it zooms out all the way through the whole map. And the map, like, ancient forest is a maze in terms of actual gameplay, but in terms of visuals, it's a very cool looking jungle. And at that time, it was like, wow, it was a real wow factor trailer. And I love all the Wilds trailers, but it is very desert, sand, you know, yellowy brown, and that's what it looks like. The only thing I'll say is when you were playing it in the demo and you could see the areas off in the distance, there was a bit of color. There was a bit of something in the distance that obviously we couldn't go and explore yet. But yeah, when you're playing it, it definitely, the graphics were definitely fine. I'm more interested as to how it will look on PC. I think that will be a bigger tell for the graphics, is how high can you crank it on PC, which obviously we'll have to wait and see. And speaking of cranking up settings, let's talk about the performance, because there's been a lot of talk about it, the FPS, the different things. I'll just caveat everything and say, look, preview builds usually aren't perfect. It was a hot week in Germany as well. PlayStations do have some people, apparently their PlayStations never overheated. I have like the third-party add-ons where you like slot, you know, it's like a slotted and it adds extra fans to the back and stuff like that. And mine still sometimes overheats, and I have like, it's like down here, look, it has ventilation, like there's space behind and in front, and it still sometimes overheats. And you know, from what we gathered, these PlayStations were locked in a box for the entire duration of Gamescom, right? So what happens if you lock your PlayStation in a box and put on a new game that's probably a bit resource intensive, it's probably going to struggle. So I will caveat it with that knowledge, but that being said, does it excuse certain issues, which is like sort of, I think, what people were maybe upset about? And I'll before I pass it to you, 26, I'll just quickly say, in terms of FPS, it did feel variable to me. There was definitely dips and jumps in it. And for someone that is perhaps more of a PC player, you're definitely going to feel those FPS variables. Whereas I think console players that are used to playing on primarily 30 FPS, especially historically, they probably won't notice that variability as much. But because we play a lot of PC games, it was definitely there. That being said, actually, you know, I'll pass it over to you, 26, because you played the base World of PlayStation 4 version recently, so you have a perfect contrast, right?
Yeah, definitely felt like up and down in the same way as like base World, but you guys got to remember, like, I'm not going to be like shilling for Capcom, because at the end of the day, it's not like Capcom has ever been performance gods. Do you guys remember release of like World on PC, how jank that was? And it was the same for like Rise for me on PC as well. That was also jank. So I don't know what it is. Capcom, you need to get some performance specialists. You need to talk to Digital Foundry. You need to make sure that your re-engine is working, or whatever you're moving over, if it's a blend of MT and re, that it's all working purposeful. And look, we literally just had Dragon's Dogma come out, and that was like not the greatest in terms of like performance as well.
Yeah,
so
that city was,
and that was
bad.
that was an open world game as well. So in general, it's looking like it's going to be bad performance, but they do have a lot of time. So I do have some faith that they could probably correct it by the time that the game is released, especially as people are voicing it before the game's even released. I don't think normally the game lands and people are like, what is this performance? This is like the demo's happening and you guys have been like, oh nah, this is not on, like why is it so jank, blah 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 blah. So it's good to hear that they probably have that time to react and implement it, so they don't have to release it then 2 weeks later release a patch to update the performance. But it should be a priority for people anyway in like 2024 to 2025, just because that's the way that the games industry is. I don't mind up and down frames, like, at all. I feel like I play with variable frames anyway. I obviously prefer 60 and higher. I play a lot of PC games. I always play, like, a lot of, like, the other games that we play on 100 above. I like my frames. I understand that frames are good. But in this case, track record plus being far away from release is like a load of factors that you need to kind of boil in there. And it just being a demo, like just at a game show that they're kind of just doing a vertical slice for. They could have just packed in much visual stuff as possible and not optimize that stuff. So yeah.
You know what? I'll just round that off and say, although it was variable frames, the frames wasn't at all really a problem from, I think, both of us. Like, maybe for some people they had something going on, but from the 4 hours that we got, which was spread across different runs in the different demos, there was never a point where it was like super stuttery. I think some people maybe had that, but I've talked about our experience. It wasn't like game breaking or problematic while hunting. It just felt like you're playing Monster Hunter and you're attacking, and everything was fine in that sense. The problems were more so the crashes, which I'm hoping is to do with it being a preview build and not the full game. So I'm not too worried about frame rate, apart from maybe the PC port, because that has a really bad track record with past games. But I'm more worried about how stable the actual game will be. And I'm putting on my optimistic hat that it's a preview build thing, that it won't be crashing when it actually releases. So I'm not too worried about frames. I'm more worried about crashes, but hopefully that is going to get resolved.
Let me just say something quickly as well, because I know a lot of people out there will be like, oh, you're making a big deal out of like the frame rate and the graphics. In the grand scheme of things, guys, if you're just there to play Monster Hunter and none of this matters to you, you're going to enjoy this game because it's actually like just sick. But for those that want to know this stuff about like frame rate and performance, we have to touch on it. It is an important part of the games and how games are like played as well nowadays. So you have all those options. So we have to touch on it. I've personally just had a great time with it and didn't notice the performance issues like all that much. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll just finishing thoughts. I'll just start it off. I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head there, though. The game feels really good to play. That was a potential worry, because it was like, how is it going to be after like Rise and Sunbreak? And it looks like they were going more for World in like all the trailers and the sort of marketing side of it and the ecology stuff, and the diving more into the world of it rather than they were talking more about ecology and world stuff in these different interviews and pre-release stuff, less so than like weapon specifics. And I'm always going to want to know about the weapons, even though the other stuff intrigues me. But if from playing it, it felt really good. It felt like a new Monster Hunter game in a good way. It felt like it added in a bunch of the things that I like from World, a bunch of the cool stuff from Rise, as well as with, the sprinkle of different quality of life stuff. And obviously the scope of the game is bigger. So I felt like it felt really good, and it's actually made me more excited for the game to release, which is only, in that sense, is only a positive. How about you?
No, it's like, the way that I can put it is like, we're so back. Like, when I played the game, I was just like, yeah, this is the Monster Hunter that I kind of really love and really enjoy, and it's nice to see us like playing that. Obviously, I've played since like the PSP ones and all the way through, but when World dropped, I really liked that experience that it gave us, and going back to that after playing Rise, which was also a really, really good game. I really enjoyed that. That was like super, super fun. Going back to the World style of gameplay where I just played that for so many hours, it just felt like that, oh yeah, something clicked again, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. I'm more excited to play this game and experience it with you, the community, everybody, and just have a bunch of fun. I want to see what the lobby sizes are, if we can just invite a bunch of people in there. Rise had kind of like that lobby stuff going on, but not as broad as big. I want to see them go more expansive, see more stuff out in the open world. Some of that kind of social aspect was kind of lost when Rise released as well, so I just want to see that come back, and we're gonna have a good time.
Yeah, there better be some kind of raid lobbies or something, kind of like Cold Card style, but actually get like the people involved, not just make it like a lobby thing.
Yeah, 16-player hunts. Like, we haven't like actually seen that, and they kind of obviously teased that in Call of Taroth, where we had them like in different lobbies like racing it, and they kind of sold it as, oh yeah, you're gonna be hunting and doing this stuff, and then when you get in game, it's just like 2 lobbies of like people like racing against each other. So hopefully they can realize that vision and have like some massive monsters where you actually do some siege, like 16-player battles or whatever going on.
Yeah. So guys, I hope that these sort of impressions and review of what we got to play has gleamed a light on different questions and things that you guys had about Monster Hunter Wilds. It's ran on a bit longer than we thought, so we will wrap it up there. But thank you everybody for watching. I'm going to have more videos on your favorite games coming very, very soon.
Bye-bye.